but this one over here was on the other side, so they never replaced this one, at least not to my knowledge. And if you guys can tell, there's literally no resistance there. What's going on, YouTube? In today's video, I'm going to be talking about how reliable and durable the BMW 435 is. A lot of this is going to apply to most F32s. Something actually recently happened to the car that inspired me to make this video, so if you want to hear more about that, definitely stay tuned. I'll talk more about it later in the video. But yeah, guys, stick around and stay tuned. Alright, so I just want to say really quickly, if you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. It'll really help me out. Anyways, let's get into it. Alright guys, so here's the car. If you guys are new to the channel, this is a 2015 BMW 435. It is xDrive. It is a coupe, obviously, as you guys can see by only 2 doors. And if you guys couldn't tell, the car has some work done to it. So it's definitely not factory. It definitely was for the majority of its life. So I would say most of these major mods honestly happened within like the last 2,000 miles or so. So the car currently has about like 64,000 miles. I know I said 60,000 in like the video title and all that type of stuff, but it has like 64,000 miles. So I lied a little bit, but it's still close enough, guys. But yeah, so I would say around like maybe 63,000 or 62,000 miles is when I really started these modifications. So other than that, it's been pretty much stock. So a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about happened when the car was completely stock. So like I mentioned in the intro, guys, this is going to be like about the reliability of this car, but not only that, but also the durability. So what I mean by that is not just like the reliability of like, you know, the mechanical aspect of it, but the durability of the car itself. So that's also going to include like how durable the interior is. So obviously, you know, with cars aging and stuff like that, the interior doesn't always hold up. So as you guys can see, it's not too bad, but I will go into more detail because there are some things I do want to note, you know, just like overall how durable the car is, you know, in terms of like paint, rock chips, all that type of stuff. Obviously the mechanical stuff as well, any issues that I've had with it, any work that I needed to get done to it, you know, all that type of stuff. So before I get into all that, guys, I just want to note, so this car I actually bought certified, so I didn't own it for its entire life. Again, it has about like 64,000 miles or so, but I actually bought the car when I had about like 35,000 miles. I bought it certified pre-owned from a BMW dealership. I don't really have too much insight on what happened to the car before I owned the car. What I do have is a list of service records. So obviously that includes like basic maintenance and all that type of stuff, but it does also include some like issues that the car has. So what I'm actually going to do, guys, for the first half of this video is actually take you through that service record so you guys can kind of get like an idea of what happened to the car from brand new to about like 35,000 miles. Again, it's not going to be too detailed because it's just basically like a listing of service records. So if you guys are familiar with those, they're not too specific in a lot of the things that they say. But after that, I'm basically going to take you through like my experience with the car. So basically like 35,000 miles and onward up into 64,000 miles, which the car has right now. That stuff I can definitely tell you in more detail because I've actually experienced it. I know exactly what happened. So if you want to see all that, make sure you stay tuned to the end of the video. But anyways, let's jump into that right now. All right, so like I was saying, I basically want to go over everything that happened to the car before I basically owned it. So essentially like the first like 35,000 miles or so. Without further ado, let's get into that. So this over here is basically like all the service records of the car for the first 35,000 miles or so. So again, I'm going to talk you guys through like the main things. There's a lot of like normal maintenance on there, like oil changes, you know, brake changes and all that type of stuff. We're not going to go into that because honestly it's pretty standard and we're going to be here all day if I do, but I want to basically go over like all like the issues that it really had. So like if anything went wrong or anything like that. So yeah, with that said, I'm going to go through all the main things. So starting off, guys, around like 92,000 miles or so, the paper says here, door trim panel front including module carrier front door poorly adapted / fitted. So I'm assuming that basically means something on the trim of the door was basically like falling off or wasn't staying on correctly. It doesn't seem like it's too major. I haven't had anything like that happen since then. So again, that was around like 9,000 miles or so. I don't think that's too major. I'm not too worried about it. So the next one happened around like 8,500 miles. So it says the front axle / rear axle brake squeaking noise, unpleasant noises. Kind of a funny way to put it, but so it doesn't really give me much else. Doesn't really say exactly what the squealing came from, but I'm assuming the previous owner basically had like some squealing noise coming from the car. They probably reported it to BMW and they checked it out. I know the brakes on these cars tend to be a little squealy, so especially like, you know, when in like certain weather like rain and stuff like that. So maybe that's what it was and the guy wasn't used to it, so he reported it. But they don't actually list anything actually being wrong, so I'm assuming it's fine. I wouldn't really you know, think about that one too much. So the next one actually wasn't around until like 35,473 miles, which is interesting because that was literally like right before I bought the car. It says rubber hydraulic mount tension strut / compression strut inner leaking. I love these descriptions, they're very robotic, but so it basically sounds like a strut was leaking, which obviously is not good. That probably happened due to a pothole. I'm gonna get into a little later, but I've actually had some issues with the struts on these cars, more than just one issue. So, and I know the issues that I've had, again, I'll go into a little more detail, but they had to do with potholes. So the previous owner of this car, they lived in New Jersey. I live in New York, so I'm assuming their roads probably aren't too different than ours over here in New York. So they probably dealt with some potholes and stuff like that. I don't think it's too much of an issue per se, but given the fact that I've had some issues with these struts, well, not these ones specifically on the car, but you know, like struts on this car in general, that probably is a little more problematic. So yeah, again, I think that's pretty much it. But yeah, guys, that pretty much wraps it up for like the first 35,000 miles on the car, again, before I owned it. So now I'm going to get into a little more detail about some of the items that happened while I was actually owning the car. I can definitely give you more information about it, not just like a short description on some like service records, thankfully. So again, hopefully that will give you guys a better idea. So if you guys want to see that, definitely stick around. There's still a lot more to this video, so let's jump into that. All right, so yeah, that was everything for the car, 35,000 miles and below. Now I want to basically take you guys through everything I've experienced with the car. So again, about like 35,000 miles to the 64,000. So I'm gonna do my best to keep it in like chronological order of like everything that happened to the car in like the lifespan of it. I'm probably not gonna be the best about it, but regardless, I'm gonna try. So one of the first things that actually happened to this car as soon as I first bought it, so again, bought it with 35,000 miles. So when I first bought it, guys, I actually noticed that the ambient lighting on this door over here, if I can kind of get in the shadow, this piece over here was kind of, you know, it was a little dimmer than the other side at least. So I actually took it to BMW and I basically like noted it to them because the car was obviously still under warranty when I first bought it. The guy wasn't too specific, but I think he said like one of the lights in here kind of cracked, which I don't know what would really cause that. I'm guessing maybe someone like hit this. I don't really know. Again, he didn't give me too much context. He kind of just like brushed me off, but basically this ambient lighting was broken over here. It did work, but it was just super dim, like you could barely see it. So thankfully they did fix that, but that was actually the first issue that I ever had with this car. After that, guys, like the car was pretty solid. The first real issue that I had on it after that was one of the struts. So like I mentioned before, obviously the car did have an issue with one of the struts before, and I also had some issues with the struts. So not only this issue, some other ones that I'll note as well. Yeah, basically one day I was driving and I hit like a really nasty pothole, you know, like one of those potholes that it's like so bad that you literally have to like pause. So I actually stopped on the side of the highway. The car looked fine, but the next time I took it to BMW, they actually told me that this strut over here, so the front driver's side, was actually leaking. Again, the car was still under warranty, so they did replace it for me. Although the pothole was really bad, I've hit some really bad potholes in some other cars and never really had a strut start to leak because of it, so I don't know, but definitely something to know. Also, guys, just something else, this car was on 18s at the time, so currently, obviously, I have some aftermarket 19s with some smaller sidewalls on it, but when that happened, the car was on 18, so it had the bigger sidewalls, you know, it had a little more like, I guess, like meat to absorb the hit, but obviously that wasn't enough because the strut still started leaking. But yeah, I just want to point that out as well. So while on the topic of like struts and suspension, so obviously as you guys can see, this car is lowered. It is super low. This is obviously not the factory suspension, so I did swap out the entire suspension for some KW V1 coilovers. But yeah, the point of me saying that is when I swapped out the suspension, obviously I took the old one out and I did notice something in it. So I just ran inside in the heat. It is like super hot today, guys, but yeah, I just ran inside so I can grab these so I can show you guys. These are actually the front original struts. So if you guys can tell, this one over here was the front driver's side. So if I can show you guys, if I press down, there's definitely, you can't tell, but I'm definitely struggling. There's a good amount of resistance. So obviously, if you guys are following, this one was relatively new because the other one started leaking and they replaced it. So this one's probably about like, I want to say like maybe 10,000 miles old or something like that. So definitely still pretty young, but this one over here was on the other side, so they never replaced this one, at least not to my knowledge. And if you guys can tell, there's literally no resistance there. So if I can just show you guys one more time, like I know it's hard to tell like how much force I'm putting, but like trust me guys, I'm putting like barely any force, so like it goes like nothing. And again, just to show you one more time, this is the newer one, so if I push down, and I'm just really struggling here, guys, but it definitely has a lot more resistance, so pretty interesting. So obviously the newer one is a lot better because it's newer, but this one's been on the car for, I want to say 60,000 miles, again, at least to my knowledge, and it's basically like just shot. So based on these three things, so essentially, one, the issue noted on the service records, two, the issue that I personally had on the front left, And then 3, just kind of seeing the original front passenger side strut. It's pretty safe to say the struts on this car do not last too long. Yeah, I just found that super interesting. You know, it is what it is, guys. Like, thankfully I replaced mine with some coilovers, so I'm all good now. But yeah, it's just interesting and something definitely worth noting. So other than that, guys, something else I want to show you is actually inside the engine bay. So if I can open up the hood over here, if you guys watch my channel, you probably already saw a video about it before, but I want to show you guys again to, you know, kind of like show everything in this video all at once. So obviously the car is running right now. I'm actually doing that because, again, it is super hot, so I'm trying to keep the AC inside the car running. So once in a while I'll stop and sit in the AC. But what I was basically talking about is the expansion tank hose over here. So I did a whole separate video about it, guys, but essentially it ended up bursting on me. So let me actually cut to a quick video of that. So yeah, as you guys can tell, this is basically where it like bursted from. So it's apparently super common in these cars. You know, something that I'm not surprised happened. Thankfully, it was a pretty easy fix. I think the expansion tank hose itself was about like 40 bucks. And then to actually do it, I did it myself in like 5 or 10 minutes or so. I actually did a video on how to do it. Although I haven't heard of many people having issues with the struts on these cars, that expansion tank hose, I've heard a lot of people having issues on. I don't know if I'm just unlucky with the struts, but that expansion tank hose, like, I can almost guarantee that yours is gonna go out as well. So definitely stay ahead of the curve and try to switch it out maybe like every 40 to 50,000 miles or so. I got lucky and mine blew out when I was like working on the car in the parking lot, but I can only imagine if it happened while I was driving. That's definitely an easy one worth fixing yourself. The struts, probably not the easiest to do. I can't really give you an exact idea of how much it would cost because I never had to replace them myself. I can tell you that the coilovers I got were about like 1,400 bucks. So if you guys are planning on getting one of these cars and just replacing the suspension anyways, coilovers for this car is probably going to cost about like 1,000 and up. The ones that I got, again, are pretty good. They're not the best and they're not the worst. They're about like 1,400 bucks. So just kind of give you like a general idea. So yeah, guys, in terms of like mechanical issues, I think that's mainly it. There is one more I want to point out to you guys, but I'll actually go over that when I'm inside the car because it's actually easier to show you. But in terms of outside, I think we're pretty much done, which thank God, because it is burning hot right now. Now we get to hide inside the AC. So let me do that. All right, so I should probably lower this so you can actually hear me a little better. I'm still gonna leave it on because, you know, I don't want to die. But anyways, one of the issues, guys, that I'm having with this car, the one that actually inspired me to make this video, is actually the tie rods. So the reason why I say that is because when I got the coilovers put in, obviously I took the car to get a wheel alignment. So after the wheel alignment, the mechanic basically pointed out that my tie rods are bad. Unfortunately, that does cause your steering wheel to kind of be a little you know, off-centered, and it can kind of affect the steering of the car. So I have noticed that the steering does feel a little numb in the center. So I'm actually going to make a separate video entirely about the tie rods and all that. I already bought the parts and everything, but I just need to get them installed. It's thankfully nothing too major, but it's definitely an inconvenience. So it is what it is, guys. Hopefully it'll be an easy fix. The parts themselves cost me about like maybe like 150 bucks. I think it'll probably cost me like 50 to 100 bucks to have a mechanic do it. Honestly, just don't want to do it in this heat. As you guys can tell, you can probably even just tell from the sun, like, it is blazing hot outside. I don't want to sit outside and lift up the car and deal with that. It's just not worth it to me. So I'm gonna send it to a mechanic to fix. But yeah, with that said, guys, I think that pretty much wraps up the mechanical issues. So something else I wanted to go over is like the durability of this car, specifically within the interiors. So obviously the exterior is gonna really depend on like how you drive it, where you drive it. Obviously I live in New York, so I deal with like winters, I deal with summers, I deal with a lot of different weather conditions. I did daily this car for a long time, and I still do drive it a decent amount. So I do definitely have some rock chips on the car, but it is what it is, guys. That's just part of owning a car. But something I did want to talk about specifically is the durability of the interiors. So I've noticed a lot of older cars, like the interiors just kind of start to fall apart and just looks like really bad. Like the seats start to crack and all that type of stuff. So I wanted to give you guys like an idea of like how this interior has been holding up. So nothing too serious to note, but definitely a couple things I want to show you guys. So one of the first things I actually want to show you guys is the door armrest over here. So if you guys can tell, the leather over here seems like it's kind of fading. So if you can tell, this is basically when I'm driving, like where I basically put my arm, but with time it does seem to have like faded out and kind of like fall apart a little bit. It's a little unfortunate. I obviously have the red interior and I love it, so it's kind of sad to see it start to go like that. But it happened right over there, over here as well. It's nothing too major. Like from a distance, I mean, you can definitely see it, but it's not horrible. It's at least not like ripping. Another area that these cars tend to like rip and crack is right over here. When I actually first bought the car, I watched a video and some guy pointed it out, and he said like the reason is like the way that this car is like shaped and the door shaped. Whenever you get inside, just like without even thinking, you kind of like just rub on the seat over here. And obviously with time and repetition, that starts to make the seat crack and just like break open over the bolster over here. So obviously after watching that, I paid like super close attention and made sure I didn't do that. So now it's 64,000 miles. The seat still does look good. Like there's no issues. Over here is like another area where the seat tends to rip, especially like in the kind of like vertical lines like that. But as you guys can see, mine is still holding up. Still holding up over here as well. In terms of the steering wheel, it definitely looks like there's some fading. Probably a lot of this has to do with like dirt. Just probably needs like a good clean, but otherwise it's not too bad. Again, no cracking or breaking. The armrest over here actually is holding up pretty well. I'm surprised it's not fading out like the door, which is pretty interesting because I do leave my arm on this a lot, but it's actually holding up really well. So on the passenger side, as you guys can tell, it's also holding up really well. Obviously it's used a lot less. Even if I can show you like the armrest over here, like there's no fading or cracking, obviously, because there isn't a passenger in this car nearly as much as there's a driver actually driving the car. So definitely held up pretty well on this side. Yeah, overall, like honestly the interior held up pretty well. I would just say like the main thing is that fading on the door over there. That's the biggest thing. So in terms of the durability of the exterior, obviously that's going to depend a lot on like where you drive it, how often you drive it, and how fast you drive it, all that type of stuff. But I've definitely got a good amount of rock chips on the car, if you guys can tell, more towards like the bottom. And then also guys, I've actually gotten some rock chips on like the side mirror caps. So the original carbon fiber ones that actually came with this car, I've since changed them out for these ones. Also obviously have some door dings in the car, which I have made a whole video about. But yeah, that just kind of depends again on where you park and all that type of stuff. All right, so that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully you guys found that video entertaining. Hopefully you found it informative. You know, maybe it gives you guys like a good idea of how reliable these cars are and like what to kind of expect if you're gonna buy one or you own one. I know 60,000 miles isn't too far into its life, but it's definitely a good milestone. Overall, the car's been pretty solid. I can't really complain too much, but hopefully it stays that way. Again, I'll keep on making videos to update you guys, you know, as it goes along. I do drive this car a lot, so you know, I'm probably gonna be racking up miles pretty quickly. But yeah, with that said, guys, make sure you drop a like on this video, drop a comment, let me know what you guys think. And lastly, if you're not already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. New videos pretty often, so definitely stay tuned. Anyways, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.